I'm going to go ahead and step in and hand the mic to another friend and person who will inspire you all, I'm sure, as she always does me when I hear her speak. So Audrey Kitagawa, please, the mic is yours, and thank you for being here.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I wish to express my deepest appreciation to you, James Patton, for this invitation to share today on a very important day, and that is the International Day of Nonviolence. And I also express my appreciation to ICRD for creating this 3-day observance on this important day, where we really can share our perspectives as well as participation in helping to support nonviolence. And I can hear from the conversations that have already taken place that it is very rich indeed from the multitude of perspectives from which we are each approaching nonviolence. And today, October 2nd, is Mahatma Gandhi's birthday. And if he were still alive, he would be 153 years old. And I want to take you all on a walk through memory lane on the important ethical principles, values, and messages which Gandhi's life represented, and the enduring nature of his legacy, which we honor through this International Day of Nonviolence. And this International Day was created by the United Nations in 2007 and was viewed as an occasion to disseminate the message of nonviolence, including through education and public awareness, which is exactly what you are trying to do with this 3-day seminar, Jim. And the resolution which created this day reaffirmed the universal relevance of the principles of nonviolence and the desire to secure a culture of peace, tolerance, understanding, and nonviolence. And it is observed on Mahatma Gandhi's birthday. And this birthday commemoration and the tie-in was introduced in the General Assembly on behalf of 140 co-sponsors. And India's then Minister of State for External Affairs, Anand Sharma, said that the wide and diverse sponsorship of the resolution was a reflection of the universal respect from Mahatma Gandhi and of the enduring relevance of his philosophy. And this respect from the international community for this leader of the Indian independence movement and a trailblazer in the philosophy and strategy of nonviolence was really historic. So Mr. Sharma noted that Mahatma Gandhi is saying nonviolence is the greatest force at the disposal of mankind. It is mightier than the mightiest weapon of destruction devised by the ingenuity of man. And Gandhi believed that just means would lead to just ends, and that it was irrational to try to use violence to achieve a peaceful society. So Gandhi's strategy and philosophy inspired other peace movements, including that of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his civil rights movement in the United States, for which he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. And at the time that he received the Nobel Peace Prize, Martin Luther King was the youngest Nobel Peace Laureate. And Dr. King called Gandhi a guiding light and said that Gandhian philosophy was the only morally and practically sound method open to oppressed people in their struggle for freedom. Subsequent nonviolent movements besides the civil rights movement included the People's Power Revolution in the Philippines and the Estonian Singing Revolution, which demonstrated the rippling effect of Gandhi's philosophy. And Gandhi might have been the first to harness the power of nonviolence on a large political and civil society scale, but the world has taken heed of his example. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres recognized Gandhi's vision and philosophy as pillars of the work of the United Nations and acknowledged his genius in seeing the interconnectedness and unity between all things. And according to the UN, the name of Mahatma Gandhi transcends the bounds of race, religion, and nation states, and has emerged as the prophetic voice of the 21st century. And the world remembers Gandhi not just for his passionate adherence to the practice of nonviolence and supreme humanism, but as the benchmark against which we test men and women in public life and the hopes and wishes of our shared planet. Much has been said and written about Gandhi. He said he and his philosophy are often associated with the concept of transcendence and interconnectedness, and his messages and achievements are termed prophetic and miraculous. He was called Mahatma, or great soul, as well as Bapu, or father of the nation, and such words have rarely been used to describe other world leaders. And I suggest that the reason why Gandhi has been such an inspiring leader is that his people's movement was based on important values and spiritual principles that we all aspire to as human beings, who constantly seek to develop and refine our own inner moral compass and live in alignment with our ethics, values, and principles in daily life that speaks to our true essence as spiritual beings. And Gandhi himself practiced diligently to bring his own daily life in alignment with the values with which he held to be important in shaping and guiding his life. And the Gandhian strategy is a combination of truth, sacrifice, nonviolence, selfless service, and cooperation. According to Gandhi, one should be brave and not a coward, and he should present his views, suggestions, and thoughts without being violent. And it's really interesting to note that Gandhi's turning point came through an incident of discrimination which he experienced in South Africa. He studied law in England, and after becoming a lawyer, his job required that he move to South Africa. At that time, the ruling white descendants of Dutch settlers, known as the Boers, discriminated against all people of color. And though Gandhi had a first-class ticket, he was forced to sit in third-class coach by railway officials, and he refused to give up his first-class seat. And the police forced him off the train. He then became an outspoken critic of South Africa's discrimination policies. And when the Boer legislature passed a law requiring that all Indians register with the police and be fingerprinted, Gandhi, along with many other Indians, refused to obey the law. He was arrested and put in jail, the first of many times he would be imprisoned for disobeying what he believed to be unjust laws. While in jail, Gandhi read Henry David Thoreau's essay on civil disobedience. And Gandhi adopted the term civil disobedience to describe his strategy of nonviolently refusing to cooperate with injustice. But he preferred the Sanskrit word satyagraha, or devotion to truth. And following his release, he continued to protest the registration law by supporting labor strikes and organizing a massive nonviolent march. Finally, the Boer government agreed to end the most objectionable parts of the registration law. Now, two defining principles of Gandhi's philosophy were ahimsa, or nonviolence, and satyagraha, or holding firm to the truth. Ahimsa literally translates from Sanskrit as absence of injury. And according to Metta Center for Nonviolence, the original Sanskrit meaning implies the power released when all desire to harm is overcome. So ahimsa is also considered love in action and has always been an important spiritual concept in Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism. Ahimsa was a guiding principle behind satyagraha, which means holding firmly onto truth. To me, said Gandhi, God is truth and love. And practitioners of his theory of satyagraha faced, many contentious situations in a nonviolent way, and seeking the truth of the situation in the spirit of peace and love through a process of self-evaluation and getting in touch with the divine truth which lives in each heart. It required the exercise of the purest soul force against all injustice, oppression, and exploitation. And Gandhi adopted the term civil disobedience to describe his strategy of really putting into action satyagraha and ahimsa. Professor Gene Sharp, who's a leading scholar on nonviolent resistance, uses the following definition in his publication, The Politics of Nonviolent Action. Nonviolent action is a technique by which people who reject passivity and submission and who see struggle as essential can wage their conflict without violence. Nonviolent action is not an attempt to avoid or ignore conflict. It is one response to the problem of how to act effectively in politics, especially how to wield powers effectively. One key tenet of the theory of nonviolence is that the power of rulers depends on the consent of the population, and nonviolence therefore seeks to undermine such power through withdrawal of the consent and cooperation of the populace. And there are three main categories of nonviolent action. One, protest and persuasion, including marches and vigils. Two, non-cooperation. And three, nonviolent intervention, such as blockades and occupations. In examining an important example of Gandhi's genius in mobilizing the masses, he staged the famous Salt March. The British back then taxed salt, which represented 8.2% of the British tax revenue. And it was an item used by all Indians of all classes and all religious persuasion. However, it hurt the poorest Indians the most. And Gandhi said, next to air and water, salt is perhaps the greatest necessity of life. And the British government had the sole monopoly on the collection, manufacture, and sale of salt. And violating the Salt Act was a criminal offense. After the protests gathered steam, the leaders realized the power of salt as a symbol. And Jawaharlal Nehru remarked about the unprecedented popular response. It seemed as though a spring had been suddenly released. And the Indian National Congress, led by Gandhi and Nehru, issued a declaration which said, "We believe that it is the inalienable right of the Indian people, as of any other people, to have freedom and to enjoy the fruits of their toil and have the necessities of life so that they may have full opportunities for growth. We believe also that if any government deprives a people of these rights and oppresses them, the people have a further right to alter it and abolish it. The British government in India has not only deprived the Indian people of their freedom, but has based itself on the exploitation of the masses and has ruined India economically, politically, culturally, and spiritually. We believe, therefore, that India must sever the British connection and attain complete sovereignty and self-rule." So the campaign forced the British to recognize that their control of India depended entirely on the consent of the Indians, and salt satyagraha was a significant step in the British losing that consent. Nehru considered the salt satyagraha the high watermark of his association with Gandhi and felt that its lasting importance was in changing the attitudes of the Indians. And he said, of course, these movements exercised tremendous pressure on the British government and shook the government machinery. But the real importance, to my mind, lay in the effect they had on our own people, and especially the village masses. Non-cooperation dragged them out of the mire and gave them self-respect and self-reliance. They acted courageously and did not submit so easily to unjust oppression. And their outlook widened, and they began to think a little in terms of India as a whole. And it was a remarkable transformation, and the Congress under Gandhi's leadership must have the credit for it. The International Day of Peace, of Nonviolence, and honoring Mahatma Gandhi is an important reminder that we must seek peaceful solutions in conflict issues. And the philosophy of nonviolence is gaining ground as we see more and more studies, research, conferences, and webinars like this one supporting this approach. And research conducted by Erica Chenoweth and Maria Stefan demonstrated that nonviolent campaigns were nearly twice as likely to succeed as violent uprisings. And they also discovered that nonviolent protests that engage a threshold of 3.5% of the population have always succeeded in bringing about change. This research demonstrates a recognition that the spiritual universal value of nonviolence is a necessary component for peace. For Gandhi, the practice and search for ahimsa was a lifelong journey that required self-sacrifice and self-purification. And Gandhi was the epitome of ahimsa in practice, but he himself was always seeking a deeper connection with this truth. In the final farewell in his autobiography, Gandhi wrote, "Ahimsa is the farthest limit of humility." In bidding farewell to the reader, I ask him to join with me in prayer to the God of truth, that he may grant me the boon of ahimsa in mind, word, and deed. Just as Gandhi's search for ahimsa was never ending, our own quest for peace, tolerance, nonviolence, and understanding must be a deep commitment and an unending quest. It is not a passive endeavor. His Holiness the Dalai Lama once said, "Ahimsa doesn't fall from the sky. It comes of cultivating a warm heart within. It requires great commitment, perseverance, and effort from individuals, peace workers, humanitarians, and activists, and from governments, diplomats, and international policymakers. It requires strength of character, dedication, and constant vigilance. And it is based on the deep foundational truths of the world's religions: peace, harmony, compassion, and love. To attain peace and harmony, we must restore equilibrium and equality. Peace is not possible without the upliftment of marginalized peoples and without inviting their participation in the process. There is, at the level of the divine, an inherent interconnectedness and unity in all things, and it is essential that inequities be rectified and equality and balance be restored to bring true peace to our shared planet. And Gandhi said of his own practice of ahimsa, "The more I practice, it is clearer I see how far I am from the full expression of ahimsa in my life." And understanding the nonviolence as the best and most effective response to violence requires a willingness to remove the blinders of convention and undertake a personal journey to find peace within. Our thoughts, our speech, and our actions must be loving and peaceful, and we must recognize the beauty and divinity that resides within each person. Mahatma Gandhi said, "When I despair, I remember that all through history, the way of truth and love have always won. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they seem invincible, but in the end, they always fall." Think of it. Always. We must be diligent about studying more deeply those strategies for nonviolence that work, and more importantly, to always remember the powerful spiritual values that are their foundation and undergird the fabric of life. And I thank you all for this privilege to share with you today on this International Day of Nonviolence. And it has been a walk down memory lane about Gandhi and the power of nonviolence, ahimsa, the force of truth, satyagraha, the creative, positive transformation that honors the dignity and potential of each person to live free from oppression, discrimination, and exploitation, and to each become that expression of love in action. That potential is in each and every one of us. So happy International Day of Nonviolence and happy 153rd birthday, beloved Mahatma Gandhi. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om peace, peace, peace. Thank you for allowing me to share this time with you and to share on this very special day. Thank you.
Audrey, thank you so much. What a wonderful reminder of these principles that, I have the biography down below. I'm going to pull that out and start rereading this evening, because I think we've gotten so tangled up in some of our complications of our current time that we forget some pretty basic principles that came before that we can return to and get guidance from. So what a great way to wrap our speakers today, but we have about 10 minutes for question and answer. So please, Audrey, don't go anywhere. And I would look forward to folks raising hands or dropping questions into the chat. I don't know if we have anything, Mariam, already to work off.
So I see Paul left a question before he left, and since we're recording this, he'll be able to watch it later, but he asked if there is any research around which aspects of nonviolent resistance are most effective against different forms of violence, or is that question a bit too context specific, or whether there's a broad answer that could be given to that. And that was his question.
Oh, sorry. Frankly, I myself don't know of any specific research, and I'm not saying that it's not out there. However, it could be too broad and it could be also content specific. However, what's important for all of the listeners and participants on this webinar is the fact that the context specific is ourselves. And whether or not we ourselves are living in alignment with our spiritual values, our own ethics. And, you know, as I had indicated in my presentation, it takes a great deal of humility to be a constant student of life in learning how to expunge the impurities within our own hearts, within our own minds, within our own speech and actions that cause harm to others. And it doesn't have to be in the context of war. You know, there's war within ourselves. There's violence within ourselves in how we conduct our daily life. And we always have to remember that where we are is the holy ground. And we as truly spiritual beings who want to be able to live as expressions of our own spirituality must be on a humble journey, a lifelong journey that is sacred, to find the ways in which we can be the expressions of nonviolence, which is love in action. So love, you know, is not an airy-fairy term. It is the most powerful force in the universe, and we are all comprised of it. We all arose from it. We are constantly in it, and we have to constantly remember to return back to the source within our own selves.
That's beautiful. I love that answer, and especially I love how you described love. Let's see. I got a message from Bilal. Bilal, do you want to unmute and ask your question, or?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, everybody. I have a question to Kitagawa. She has elaborated very well, and she has given us the good details of nonviolence, especially in the context of Gandhian politics with reference to British colonialism. And but I have gone through all of this session, and almost 3 speakers spoke well. And what out of it I have taken is that this whole debate has been gone around the mitigating the differences, different cultures, especially the East and the especially the West and the non-West interaction between the West and the non-West is concerned, and keeping in view the latest critic on the topic of religion by Ziauddin Sardar, especially in his book Postmodernism and the Other. And conclusively, he was able to argue that historic formulation of Christian understanding is taken as the definition of the universal nature of all religious problems. And through that distorting lens, all religions are asked to address issues that are irrelevant to them and express their own understanding according to a language that is meaningless to their necessary concerns. So this was the viewpoint of Ziauddin Sardar, and this was a critique of all the postmodern perspective and Protestant theological word, and the view nihilism and different meaningless worldviews are in the market, in the supermarket of nihilism, and reality is for sale, and all other main points of his critique, especially on the postmodern world, that in the world of cults, where there are multiple connotations of the issues of the contemporary intertheological criteria, the world has not been able to develop yet, and he has focused on the traditions and religions, the way religious subject is confronted with the secular man. So this differentiation is inevitable and cannot be resolved, and identity has become a problem, and especially for the world who has not been able to incorporate in the claim that the way the postmodern individuality, I mean the lone truth seekers and the nudity and the lust and the sex sessions and the different many obsessions. What should I? So my question is, how can the world come up with the idea that the possibility of giving a chance when there can be a diverse universe of realities, and when the diverse universe of realities is there, and meaning of the ancient scripts of the Eastern world is not changed, but the change of the form. So, do you really think we have crossed the bridges? We can meet the differences between West and the non-West? Thank you.
Well, I think your commentary, as well as the question that you pose, is very indicative of the tremendous soup that we find ourselves in today, a soup of complexity. And let us recognize, first of all, that we have close to 8 billion people in the world, which is a historic number of people. We have never in the long march of human history ever had that many human beings on Earth. Necessarily, therefore, there will be complexities and growing complexities. And my wonderful spiritual mother many years ago told me, no two minds are alike. And how we perceive and our perceptual fields are also shaped by the cultures and the countries in which we live. So when you have close to 8 billion people in the world with limited resources, you're going to have to also admit that in order to be able to feed and clothe and deal with climate change and all those things, we have to be able to see how our great religious teachings and the great messages that they may have given from eons ago must find their relevance in today's application. And I think religions have demonstrated over the time and over the course of their heinous history of violence and degradation as well, have demonstrated that the very best of religious communities and faith is the fact of selfless service, that they have mobilized to address the needs of communities, people in their communities. They have been first responders in times of disaster, and in their own way, regardless of the changing face of the external world, have tried to bring forth the aspect of loving service, caring, compassion, in whatever way that they are tasked to be able to express that. And so we don't underestimate the value and importance that religious communities play in also helping to address the needy, the hungry, the poor. And, because many governments do not have the capacity to be able to address all of the people on the ground who are often forgotten, it is the religious communities that have stepped forward and really demonstrated that they still are practicing those important precepts and principles of selflessness, serving your fellow human being, and caring and compassion in action. So, let's also admit that in the times of many of these great masters, they didn't have to deal with in vitro fertilization. They didn't have to deal with nuclear bombs. And, they didn't have to deal with the horrific climate changes that are causing tremendous refugees, as we've seen in the Florida situation, et cetera. So the devastation and the impact upon the people throughout the eons have still found the resonance of religious communities stepping forward and expressing their love in action. So is there going to be complexity? Yes. And it is anticipated that our, population is going to grow to 9 billion people shortly. So it's not going to get less complex. But let me end with the powerful words of wisdom from Lord Buddha, who said, "It is all impermanent." Everything in the external world changes, and it is indicative of the evolutionary flow of human consciousness as well. And in the end, we are here to find our true meaning and purpose in the particularized form and structure with which we have been blessed to have, so that we can leave the legacy of our brief time on earth as a legacy of love in action. So thank you so much.
Audrey, thank you. Love in action. I think we'd like to add that as a subtitle for our 3 days. I really appreciate that. And as you said, the Lord Buddha said, everything is impermanent. Unfortunately, that applies to our conversation today as well. So before I hand over to Mariam to explain a little bit what the next half an hour will look like, where we break out into maybe groups of 10 or so to talk. First, obviously, I'd love to have you join me in gratitude. Normally, if we were together, we could applaud, but in gratitude to our speakers and the staff at ICRD who helped put this together. It's really an inspiring first day, and I think that the next couple of days will be remarkable as well. So I have a lot of faith in that. I'm surprised and deeply grateful that we had so many people join us on a weekend. So looking very much forward to seeing what tomorrow morning looks like and the day after. I do want to mention once again, and I realize there are a lot of initiatives all around that are urgent. I think that the ICRD team is committed right now to trying to work through faith actors here in the United States to avert what seems like trending towards potential civil violence. And the program I mentioned at the beginning of the discussion is our domestic program. We are putting a description and a fundraising button. If you all are as concerned as we are about what's happening here domestically, please do consider checking it out, and feel free to reach out to talk to us some more about it, to get details if you'd like. But the description that is now in the chat that you can click on will give you some details, and we're here and happy to try to mobilize together to avoid what is a very concerning situation here domestically. But we look forward to talking more about that with y'all if you're interested. I will now invite Mariam to step in. Thank you, Mariam, for having kind of a leading hand in putting all of this together. And please do let us know what to anticipate from the next half an hour.
Okay, thank you, James. And again, thank you, Audrey, Paul, and Dr. Mason. So I'll stop the recording here.